Salutations! I'm back at it again with another video. This time I'm gonna yap about the fantasy world I've been writing about because it is awesome. Ah! No, I dropped my fidget. Well, I've spent several years writing about my fantasy world. I've built so much culture and stuff, but I know only a small portion of it is actually gonna show up in the books, because there's only so much you can put in there before it starts sounding like Aragorn, where you're just droning, trying to sound smart, but all you're really doing is boring everyone out of their minds. Clearly I have some opinions on Aragorn that I'm not gonna get into. Anyway, this video is not about Aragorn. It's gonna be about a particular race in my fantasy world that I've written. That is all I'm gonna be talking about today. They're called the Gaiaborn. I used to call them druids because that's what I based them off of, like D&D druids, with a little bit of poison ivy in there. But the long and short of it is the Gaiaborn. But I decided Gaiaborn fits them a lot better. So, a quick history lesson for them, for the Gaiaborn, is they are a race of women. Immortal women who are strong enough to actually to level entire countries on their own. So safe to say in the modern day and age, they are not the best friends of governments, of literally anybody. That's not that doesn't revere druids like the goddesses they are. Not druids, Gaiaborn. See, Gaiaborn is a relatively new name, so I'm gonna keep switching between the two. But anyway, let's see here. So Gaiaborn are called Gaiaborn because in the age of creation, that's what I call pre-civilization, pre-Stone Age, you know, where the entire world was essentially dinosaurs, you know, before the Metazoan age, essentially. The age of creation, who were made in the age of creation, the Gaiaborn were actually the first beings to walk the earth, first humanoid beings to walk the earth aside from deities. So druids can be killed. There's just a very specific way you have to go about it. Because, yeah, they were made in the image of Gaia herself. In the original age, they were born straight from the earth and the components inside of it. And they have, in terms of physical abilities, and physical and magical abilities, they are essentially immune to all naturally occurring poisons and toxins. So again, there's a very specific way you have to go about it in order to kill a Gaiaborn. And so, you can't poison them. They can't get sick. Pretty much anything that has any death that can be viewed as a natural death, yeah, doesn't really kill them. Like, you can't drown them, they can't suffocate, you can't bury them alive because they'll just dig themselves out of the ground again. Because, again, literally born from the earth. So, the only ways you can kill a Gaiaborn nowadays is physically hurting them to the point where they can't regenerate or heal. In other words, bang, bang. Only way to kill them. And, obviously, people figured that out because later on in civilization, like during witch hunts and such, they were killed off. It is a very unfortunate portion of history, but they were killed off. They did become extinct. So present day here, the only way for a Gaiaborn to be born is if there is a woman who is born with the blessings of Gaia, essentially. They have magic. They have... Like, they could be born from literally any race, but they have to be a woman. So, let's say you were born biologically a man, but you have the blessings of Gaia. You would not be a man, you would be a trans woman. That would be the only way that they could get power. There is no such thing as a man with the blessing of Gaia. Okay, you have to understand this. Even if they are gender fluid, they would only be able to use their powers and even have the actual blessings of Gaia, which a part of it includes your body, everything except for reproduction, your body being essentially frozen at the absolute peak of your performance until you die. That is like, you have to be a woman. There is no way to go around it. No exceptions. Ever. You have to be a woman to be a Gaiaborn. No ifs, ands, or buts. Okay? Fun fact, Gaiaborn actually have fertility issues. So there's really not a lot of races that came about out of them. The only races that really came about because of them was, let me think here, the nymphs and the fae. That is it. That is truly it. Nymphs and fae. Nymphs and dryads, I find, once I start looking them up, nature nymphs and dryads are very similar, so I'm just combining them both into the same race. Nymphs are essentially women born of Gaiaborn that, while have a lot of the similar powers, they don't have the main part of the blessing of Gaia, which is absolute immunity to anything in their natural environment. Which the natural environment that they are born in determines their powers. So, let's say for a second you were born in an area like the Middle East, Egypt, some kind of massive sandy desert area. You would have the powers of the mummy. You would be able to communicate with literally every creature and plant within that area, as well as outside of it, because that's just a general part of being a Gaiaborn. But anyway, you'd be able to talk, communicate, so you'd be able to summon plagues of locusts, control sandstorms, make cacti grow out, whatever cacti is native to your area, grow out of the ground wherever you want to go, whatever plant life, what little plant life is there. That would be your power. You'd be able to sprout them from essentially almost nothing. Like, you'd be able to sprout them from the tiniest particle of pollen. Pollen! You wouldn't even need seeds, you just need pollen. And you'd be able to summon an entire barrage of plants and such. This is why they are able to smash entire civilizations. The only thing that stops them is Gaia herself. So Gaia, for some reason, is like gone. Completely invisible. She is nowhere to be found. No one has been able to find her. However, there is obvious evidence that she still watches the druids. Like, the Gaiaborn, like, she watches over them like a hawk. So one of the other ways for a Gaiaborn to die is if they start using their powers selfishly. Like, the entire point of their existence is to essentially be the one person who's balancing the scales between nature and civilization. They are the bridge between plants, animals, and humans, or humanoid beings, essentially. So, let's say, so Baba Yaga is actually a Gaiaborn, and one day she died. She used her powers. If you ever researched Russian mythology, you would know that Baba Yaga is an incredibly selfish and mean person, even cannibalizing on others. Now, she did this. So now, in my world, she would, oh, wow, this is difficult to explain. I'm definitely gonna need a lot more trigger warnings for this video. Anyway, so what wound up happening was eventually she crossed the line. She used to find loopholes and excuses for using her powers selfishly, like, oh, they were poaching or killing this, making these creatures extinct. It's a righteous punishment, blah, 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 blah. But one day she did something that couldn't be excused, and she wound up being absorbed by her own power. Like, she wound up bursting. Well, actually, no. She wound up swallowed up by the earth itself, never to be seen again. So, obviously, there is a limit to what you're able to do as a Gaiaborn. And you essentially have to be there. You are out in nature. You have to be out in there. And the funny thing about it is that when you're born a Gaiaborn, there's actually no way you can hide your connections to nature. Like, let's say you were born a demi-human, which I call wilds in my thing. So, you know, just a person with ears and a tail, like a lycanthrope, or like, let's say a dragon. You would be able to make yourself humanoid to a certain degree, but you wouldn't be able to, aside from like putting on a hat to hide the ears or stuffing your tail up your shirt, you wouldn't be able to hide the fact that you are Gaiaborn, that you would have an obvious connection to nature at all. So Gaiaborn tend to be, so non-human born Gaiaborns tend to be really easy to spot because of that inability to completely disguise themselves. And the thing is, so when there were witch hunts going around, Gaiaborn went extinct around, like, the last one was killed in Salem. However, one thing that some Gaiaborn, that all Gaiaborn are actually able to do, but only a few actually think of doing this, is that they are actually able to bequeath a certain amount of their power to another being. They can choose what they give to another person, and it won't go away after they die. Person and or animal. So, in the world of Sunset Gaia, the last druid thought to make her best friend, her bestest friend in the whole wide world, a giant grizzly bear, her ability of immortality, along with a bunch of her memories, like, along with guarding this one item that was given to her by a dragon. Dragon culture is going to be explained in another video. I don't feel like making the dragon video today. Today is only about Gaiaborns. So she has this item that holds her memories that was given to her by one of the dragons from that time. So she tasked that bear with guarding it and protecting it, tying it around the bear's neck, so that way he might give it to the next Gaiaborn that is born. So there is an immortal bear running around in the Americas. He is very old, very grumpy, hates everyone and everything. But because she had given some of her abilities to that bear, the bear can identify who is Gaiaborn, and until around let's see here. Until the Gaia herself determined that the world was in fact safe enough for there to be a Gaiaborn, another Gaiaborn born, she did. However, that Gaiaborn's powers didn't surface until around 2020. Because, obviously, she's still gonna have to hide everything about herself until then. But there were obvious signs that she was a Gaiaborn, learned how to hide. You know, that sort of thing. So that way she couldn't be... And obviously she can't be manipulated by any one government. So Gaiaborn tend to be essentially their own independent entities. They are, even though they don't have any one particular nationality, they are still all Gaiaborn. And therefore behave with their own autonomy. Like each individual Gaiaborn is essentially considered their own individual country. And, yeah, clearly there's a reason why when the dragon hunters thought they won and finally made dragons extinct, went directly after the Gaiaborn next. Because they knew what the Gaiaborn could do. If they so choose and found an excuse to. Now, here is a full list of historical figures that are Gaiaborn. The first one and earliest example of it is going to be the mate to the first dragon, which I can't even remember her name. Crap. Hang on. I've just gotta pull it up. See here. The first one was actually the last of the first generation of Gaiaborn. So she was literally born from the soil and the ground. As such, her connection with nature is much stronger than anything else. Oh, come on. Load. You should have a connection to the internet. Come on. There we go. Okay, let's see here. I have that, which actually, that was a part of a fairy tale. Sephora! That's her name! Sephora! Sophora. Sephora. I named her after an extinct plant, but she was the last of the first generation of Gaiaborn. At least could be considered the last of the first generation of Gaiaborn. Thing is, though, I have her as sort of like a ghost story. Thing is, no one ever actually saw her get killed. She's the first Grek tortoise. She was the first Grek tortoise. I haven't decided whether I just want her to have the same fate as Gaia, where she is way too good at hiding for her own good. No one knows if she's still alive or not. I think I still kind of want her to be there, but just not in any of the stories. Like, she's just watching in the background. And, let's see here. The next Gaiaborn is actually Demeter. There's actually a few deities that became deities through being Gaiaborn. Like, essentially, they were Gaiaborn that were so good at their job they got promoted to deity. That's it. So, Demeter is a Gaiaborn. I level a few. Demeter is just one that's, again, really good at hiding and being in the background. Demeter is actually... In the modern day, Demeter runs a agricultural tech company where she is currently making advances in environmentally friendly agricultural practices, because you cannot have people in civilization, like, no one can survive without food. So her job is literally just to make sure that people can grow their own food without causing too much damage to the environment. Which is why she runs a company that directly competes with said industrial bigwigs that, let's face it, don't really care too much about the environment, only about making money. I haven't decided on what her company name is yet. I don't really think I'm ever gonna focus too much on her, but just know that she is there. That is her company. That she has a company that develops environmental tech that is both affordable and environmentally friendly. Now, you might be wondering about Persephone now that I mentioned Demeter, if you know your Greek mythology. So, Persephone's story is going to be a fair bit different, because Persephone is actually a Gaiaborn, and the thing is, some myths I see, she was born from clay, that I see. I'm not sure how accurate it is to actual mythology, but I don't really care. So Persephone is gonna be like Amethyst in Crystal Universe, where technically she was the first gen, because she was born out of the soil, but she didn't peek her head out or come about until much later, like in the ceramic age of human civilization. And Demeter had found her already almost fully grown, and mentored Persephone until Persephone was old enough to decide for herself what she wants. What she wants is to help Hades manage the afterlife in the underworld. So her job is essentially to make the ghosts and spirits more comfortable enough to just move on with their afterlives. Essentially, that's why she spends some time above, like, as part of her job is just ghost therapist, essentially, which I forgot to mention, all Gaiaborn can see ghosts and spirits that are unable to move on or even able to move on to the afterlife. They can see literally everything to do with the afterlife. Let's see here. Who else? There's more. I know there's more. Oh yeah, Hans Christian Andersen's Ice Queen. She's a Gaiaborn, born in the ice caps. She is what I would like to call a third gen, since she was actually born from the ice cap, from an iceberg itself. But she was more artificially made by another Gaiaborn, which honestly will remain unnamed. I don't wanna. But, so another Gaiaborn had essentially taken a ghost, put it inside of a human form, made from an iceberg, and out popped the Ice Queen. She's only really notable because of Hans Christian Andersen, who had found, so most Gaiaborns actually have a really close connection with ice, with dragons. So almost every one of them that we know of today will have had a little trinket that holds all their memories as they experienced them. So Hans Christian Andersen had actually found it, saw what was in it, and decided, you know what, I'm gonna make a book about it. So in that universe, only reason people remember the Ice Queen is because of Hans Christian Andersen. Let's see now. Okay. Next up is Lady of the Lake. Now, she is remembered because of Arthur Pendragon, or Uther Pendragon, who, you know, was an actual historical figure. And Roman, actually. So she was very prominent until the medieval Middle Ages. You know, after the fall of the Roman Empire, which is when she was actually killed. So, that's fun. She was killed by dragon hunters, which, again, I'll go into dragon hunters in another video. This is about Gaiaborn and their struggles and what they went through. And, oh, let me think here. See, you're the Mummy. The book, The Mummy. Okay, that was actually based off of a Gaiaborn that was thought to be a pharaoh. But since she was killed, like, it's really difficult to explain because I haven't really named this one. But pretty much, if there's any story involving these amazing creatures with fantastical powers seeming to control the dead and that sort of thing, those are Gaiaborn. And the only reason they were thought to be men was because they were found by archaeologists who, let's face it, archaeologists never... women is like the last thing on their minds. And actually, their little memory trinkets often wind up being lost or just flat out ignored. Okay, let's see here. What other prominent figures? Let's see here. The Deer Woman actually is a Gaiaborn, but she like many others went missing ages ago. But there's still signs of her existence just randomly going around in the world of Sunset Gaia. Let's see here. I haven't figured out what the name of the first Gaia born since around whatever year the Salem witch hunts happened. I haven't decided on her name yet, but she does exist. Yeah. Okay, that's all I have for Gaiaborn so far. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be more, which I can make in a more in-depth video on the fantasy world of Sunset Gaia in general. But until then, I hope everyone has a nice day. Have fun with this. But at the end of the day, this is still my story. These are still things that I am going to put in my books. So please keep that in mind and be respectful about it, okay? Okay. Until then, may the brain rot consume you.